Hey guys, welcome to Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. This is your host Sid Patel. I'm here with Shehzad Hoosein. He's a COO of Cannabistry. I'll have Shehzad, introduce himself to the community. Shehzad, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Sid. It's a pleasure to be on. I'm Shehzad Hoosein. Everyone calls me Shez. Now I'm COO, Chief Operating Officer at Cannabistry. Been working at Cannabistry for about 7 years now. Came through, started off as Vice President of Product Development and Innovation, and sort of over the last few years have taken over this responsibility of basically running the whole operations side of the business. Before that, I was for about 15 years at Diageo, where I took on various roles within the more the manufacturing and R&D side of the business, but product development, innovation, launching products, bringing new products to market. That's sort of where I built my skill set, and operations management as well. And that sort of gave me the platform to launch my career into the cannabis industry, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that was 7 years ago. And during that time, we built a company and a bunch of brands, and from scratch. And that was really the fun and challenging aspect of, and what enticed me into making that leap was the opportunity to build something from ground up, from absolutely zero to something, and to test yourself and see whether that's something you can even do. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. I think you said it very humbly, but what impressed me was, I think you are, just to bring context to the people, this is mainly a drink show as well, right? That's our community as well. So you worked at Diageo, I think, for almost 12 years, leading a lot of their product development, especially in the whiskey category, I believe, right?
Lots in brown spirits, yeah.
Yep, and I think at one point you had a lot of organic growth within that roles, and then you were just leading a large part of product development cycle there. So, what were you exactly responsible for in Diageo? If you may elaborate.
Yeah, so started out in on the bench, right, doing actual physical lab work, product development, creating products, and I was very much interested in the brown spirit side of the business, and that's whiskeys, rum, those types of products. And so once you get a good understanding of how on the ground level that works, I had the opportunity to kind of take a step up into managing a portfolio of projects, where you have different aspects within the supply chain kind of all having to come together. Whether it's a cost savings initiative or it's sort of an innovation launch to get the product out into the market, understand end to end how to bring that to life, how to bring that across the finish line, up stakeholder management, as well as you need to get into the weeds to understand, are these the right financials? Is this the right timing? Is this the right way to move this product through the process? Mm-hmm. Once you get that skill set, and it's not rocket science, so you do it enough times, you understand, what all the levers you can pull. At that point, we were basically I was given the opportunity to run the department, and that became, beyond just cost savings initiative or an innovation. It became an entire platform, and but my heart was always on the R&D side. My heart was in sort of the,
like by nature, you are a scientist. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Like I was a chemical engineer. I always excelled at science and math, and so at that time, timing is everything. That they were putting together a little more longer term focused platform in science and technology, and I proposed to the leadership there, said, why don't we put something together that's more focused on brown spirits as a sort of functional silo, on distillation, maturation, fermentation, blending. Why don't we create a department for science and technology just around that? And so this is a great idea, and they took that, and so they said, okay, well, you run it. I was like, great. So I did that for a little over a year and sort of put the processes in place, put the team in place, develop the pipeline. We set out for as a goal to deliver $20 million in bottom line to the company over 5 years. And so this is the result. You've taken the risk of creating this department. We should have some results to show for it. So sort of created that goal for ourselves, and then we set about trying to achieve that goal in various ways, whether it's gaining efficiencies in fermentation, putting a whole project and a program.
So let's just pause there, because I think that's a very good point. When you think about product development, you just think of actual product, right? But I'm sure in a company like Diageo, it's process, it's cost savings, it's optimizing the product, it's extending the product, it's many more things that I even don't know, right? So let's elaborate, how was it defined there, and what all were part of your responsibility there? Yeah.
So at Diageo at that time, now this is 7 years ago, probably evolved since then, but that entire area, what we call brand change, right? Okay. It was essentially, as you mentioned, there was what we call within that renovation, and renovation meant you have an existing line of products, and you're going to tweak those products around to optimize certain elements of how that product performs, whether it's functionally during production or as a consumer would interact with it. So for example, a renovation project could be, I'm running a bottle down the line, and that bottle would run more efficiently down the line if I change the dimension of the bottle a little bit. And I could get 8% faster throughput down the line. That would be a renovation project. And that's actually a really big project to do. It sounds really simple to say, but you have to have a lot of really smart minds go address that problem, get the dimensions right, and make sure it moves down the line.
So for example, over there, I'm just going to pause at a few points, right? So because a question comes up, a good one, which can add value. And an example can be, how do we bottle more bottles in this hour, right?
Exactly.
And, got it. So we'll carry on, but we'll dive into like how do you do it as well.
Yeah. Cool. Another example, so that's more of a process facing renovation project. Another example of a renovation project could be, hey, we need to change the label on a certain bottle product because the aesthetics on the label just aren't working right now, and we need to make certain elements of the label pop in a different way. So let's change the label across the whole brand. Now, that's not like a real fun project to do, and there's probably not a cost savings involved in doing so. Yeah. Most of the time, the marketing guys will add a little cost to it. But I mean, you have to manage that change. Yeah. And you have to make sure they all come out at the same time, and you have to manage expectation through, when certain SKUs within that brand are launching, and you have to, so that's not a small project.
So that's more of a top-down decision which has been made, and then you just got to roll it out. So the focus is really on implementing and making sure it's getting done, sort of thing. Got it.
Exactly. So that could be another type of renovation project.
And over there, like you're talking huge scales here, right? Like imagine Johnny Walker saying, change something. So how do you do it globally?
The way that it was organized is North America ran more or less as its own function, as its own market. And so, we worked in the context of North America, but you had connectivity to the whiskey global teams that are sitting in the UK, and a lot of interaction between the two teams. So they would be aware, or, they would have to sign off on it. But they also recognize that, locally in the US, the decisions that needed to be made, as long as they were aligned with the brand expectations, they were fine implementing those changes. Mm-hmm. Of course, not just any change, they had to sign off on it. And once they signed off on it, they would say, okay, US has this solution and the UK doesn't need to implement that. And they're okay with that. You don't have to do it across the globe. Sometimes you did. Sometimes, for example, if there was a change, I say, okay, we're going to do this across the globe. And then every market had its own implementation plan.
So one of the things that I read in your bio was that there was a project where you had to, let's say, come up with savings of $20 million of cost of goods, right? That sort of scales. And were you given like an SOP already that, okay, if you do this, you will save money, or you yourself literally had to think about ideas out of the box? And walk us over a couple of your victories that you actually contributed and that savings happened, and how that whole process works when let's say when management tells you, okay, let's save money this quarter, and think.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the answer to is there a playbook, or do you have to create the playbook? It's sort of a hybrid between the two. And to some extent, you pull in all your subject matter so it starts with a brainstorming session, right? It starts with pulling in all the subject matter experts in your vicinity, in your view, within your area, and you say, hey guys, let's get together. You're in procurement. What can you come up with? What negotiating can you do with your suppliers? Or what ideas do you have from a purchasing point of view that's going to reduce costs? All right. Hey guys, you're in liquid formulation or blending area. What ideas do you have that can reduce costs? And hey guys, you're in the bottling side of it, manufacturing side of it. What can you do? And then in the warehousing side, and then in the supply chain side. So you pull all your folks together and say, hey, what is this giant list of ideas we have, right? Then you take that list and you say, okay, well, from this list, what can we do now? And how much does that deliver? What is going to take a little longer to deliver, but we can do very easily as well? What is very difficult to achieve, but the size of prize is just enormous? And what is very difficult to achieve and doesn't have much of a size of prize. You sort of start prioritizing your ideas, and you come up with a pipeline. And the most important thing about the pipeline is to sort of balance that pipeline between things you can achieve right here and now versus which may not even have the biggest size or prize, but are still worth going after. And sitting in the future saying, hey, if we invest now behind this idea and stay at it, the potential size or prize at the end is massive, and we should go after those opportunities. And so you balance the portfolio. And I have a quote that I love that I just want to share with you. It's from this guy named Bansi. I don't know if you've heard of him, but basically what he says, firms that excel at innovation management simultaneously invest at 3 levels of ambition, carefully managing and balancing among them, which is core, adjacent, and transformational. So you have to basically play in all 3 areas. You got to be delivering something right now. You got to understand what is medium term and long term, and work on all 3 simultaneously. And if you can do that, then you're delivering a pipeline. And that's what Diageo did better than anybody else that I've seen. They did it brilliant. They were able to get, whether it was cost savings or whether it was innovation, and Diageo's innovation engine is just unbelievable. They're able to deliver right here, right now, whether it's cost savings or what consumers are looking for today. But they're also able to invest in what they envision the future to look like, and meet that demand even before the consumer is there.
Do you agree that this product development, which may fall into the whole category of innovation and improvements, comes with like a end of the day, one person's vision, like CEO or the founder who is top down has to have that sort of personality? Or you think that it's also driven by people like you, where you're pushing and you truly believe? Sometimes the technicians believe in what they're making, and they have so much convincing power that I am confident that it's going to save money. Give me that machine. How that convincing is playing on in that sort of room.
Sure. Yeah, no, I've seen it work both ways, but the way I've seen it work the best is the latter, where the folks that are in the day-to-day are generally the ones that understand what they need to do a better job. And our job as coaches, mentors, leaders, bosses is to take that input and always ask ourselves, hey, what can I do to make this person's job easier today, right? And a lot of that involves the ideas, taking their ideas, and sometimes they're onto something. And recognizing when they're onto something. But now the job is to package that idea in a way that you can sell it up the line. You can't do it without the approval of someone. That's where, running the financial models or putting together a business case or however your leadership wants you to package that idea, that's key. And being able to communicate up and say, hey, we should invest here because there's a payback on this, because it'll grow our revenue, because it will gain market share. Whatever the strategic reason for doing this is, we have to be able to package that. Now, Diageo did a great job, and most CPGs do a good job because they have a structured stage gate process to do that. So at stage 0, the new idea comes in, and there are certain metrics that you have to sort of calculate and put together against that idea. And, and then you take that and you put it up at a gate 1, as they would say at Diageo, and there's a certain group of stakeholders that look at that and say, yeah, this meets our internal hurdles for what should be a project within the organization. And at the end of the day, we will assign resources from our team to go work on this project.
Understood.
And at gate 1, you're sort of still 10-15% error in everything you're doing because it's still a concept, it's still an idea. But now you've got the buyout to move forward, and you move to a gate 2 and a gate 3 and a gate 4 and a gate 5. And at each gate, there's sort of a little more scrutiny, a little more accuracy that you need. Sometimes there's other things that you have to check off the list to say, yeah, we've done the regulatory risk mitigation plan, and here it is, at various stages of the project until that, Diageo is a gate 5, you get to the gate 5, and gate 5 is go do it, execute it, get it done, and start counting the benefits of the project. So I brought a lot of that thinking to the world of cannabis as well.
I have one last question on the alcohol side, right? For our amazing distillers out there. Just on that point, which is like saving, let's say, $20 million overall, right? Or something, any savings, right? What exactly 5 or 6 things that you did, which people can just take as notes and apply back in their distilleries, like literally look here, and there is savings in that particular area.
Sure. I mean, fermentation efficiency is really important. Right, really trying to understand the key metrics on your ferment. If you over ferment, you're losing money. If you under ferment, you're not generating enough alcohol. So getting that fermentation piece right, dialing that in. There's a lot of low hanging fruit there to go after. Right, on the distillation side, for the most part, it's not that there's not much room in that part of the operation, but just having generally good operational parameters is key. The most that you can save money on is in the maturation side of the business, for several reasons. Number one is your costs as they're maturing are losing 8-9% in some parts in Scotland, slightly less in the US, more in the Caribbean, even more, 8-9% per year in terms of proof gallons of whiskey, basically just evaporating into the atmosphere, right? And that's, if you add all that up, especially if you look at a Scotch, for example, that's aged for 12 years, 8% compounded year after year after year. That's a lot of whiskey. That's
true. It's compounding every year, actually. Yeah.
And so figuring out how to minimize that, figuring out how to prevent what we call ullage, or loss, angel share, whatever you want to call it.
Got it.
That's a critical piece of it. And at Diageo, that's one of the big programs I had put in place, is a program around figuring out how to reduce the ullage losses. And there's various things you can do, from how you reconfigure a warehouse to manage airflow around the warehouse, to just how you stack your barrels and the Scotch guys have been, they've been around for hundreds of years. They've done various things. So we were lucky. We were able to get a lot of learnings from ad hoc things the Scotch guys had done, and then sort of say, okay, let's put a program together focused on North America. That's a huge area. The other obvious piece, which I think there's a lot of new technology and good thinking around is age reduction. Now, we look at age reduction as sort of, hey, don't take my 12-year-old. There's a
we think it's cheap product.
But it 12 is just a number, right? It's just a number. It doesn't actually mean anything. What it means is it took approximately 12 years for the whiskey to achieve this profile. But what if I can achieve the same profile in 10 years, right? And those 2 years that I don't have millions and millions of liters sitting in inventory, that I can generate cash from not having 2 years worth of whiskey sitting in my warehouse. I mean, that's 20 million right there, right? So those are big programs that we should look at. And there's some very interesting companies right now that are looking at this. They have the technology to rapid age. And we did a lot of work around that. A lot of it is proprietary that, I signed documents saying I can't talk about.
Yeah.
But that's, that's the big size of price. Now, in North America, at least, finally, on the back end of it all, you pay. So there's two other areas that are low that I would go look at. One is in the blending side of it. Now, after your whiskey is aged and you're dumping it, you have a team of amazing blenders, right? Whether it's the master distiller and his team or a blending quality team, sort of puts together the profiles. And, you're trying to achieve a certain profile. Otherwise, Crown Royal, as an example, it tastes the same year after year. It's because there's a team of just amazing blenders that are working with all the marks that are coming from the warehouses and sort of adjusting the formulas, on an annual basis, if you will, not even annual, less than annual, to achieve that profile. They have a lot of institutional knowledge around how to blend this stuff because they've been doing it for 30, 40 years. And they understand, okay, if I use this mark, which is a slightly lower cost of input 8 years ago versus this mark, and I can offset it with this mark, I can actually achieve a formula that's lower cost and keep the same taste profile. So you have to really leverage your blenders because they have an integral part of how you drive that business forward. And they're also your quality check. So they will not let you go too far in any direction because then it affects the quality of the product.
Got it.
In the US, the other piece is taxes. So excise taxes in the US are astronomical, right? At that time, if I'm not mistaken, you're paying $13.50 a proof gallon on taxes. So finding ways to minimize your tax burden, there are some, there's some wiggle room in all of that through clever formulation or even order of mixing and operations. There's some ability to get tax credits if you can prove certain things were done, maximize that. There's no reason not to. You can do that without affecting the quality of your product. You just have to be smart in how you put things together and take advantage of it. And it's 2.5%. So that adds up over time.
True.
And you put that whole across the patch program together, as I just went over. Now you have a portfolio. You have a portfolio of projects. And you have a pipeline over the next 3 to 5 years of things that you're constantly, you're pushing that agenda down. And, some work, some don't work. And that's okay. That's what you go in knowing that not everything is going to work.
Yeah.
The key is to understand very quickly what's working and what's not working.
Got it.
Things that's not working, you stop it straight away and divert those resources. And that's how you do it. And that's, Diageo does that brilliantly.
Fantastic. So that's really big processes and big numbers, right? You've played with Diageo and then you move to completely an adventure in cannabis. A couple of questions there. One is, what are the similarities in cannabis, development and Diageo, and then the second would be, you know, like how like so small and versus big. How did you
Yeah.
yourself, adjusted that this is more dynamic and less resources, and that's obviously more structure and more resources?
At the end of the day, in my mind, cannabis is the similarity piece around it, right? At the end of the day, cannabis is just another raw material, right? And it's a raw material that you have to learn how to use, but that raw material can be incorporated into any matrix that a consumer would want, just like an alcohol beverage. An alcohol beverage is one form of how a raw material, which is corn or barley or malt or whatever, is used to make it a consumer product. So you ferment the corn and you distill it and you mature it and then you put it in a whiskey, right? This is the same thing. It's an agricultural product. You harvest the cannabis, you extract it, you infuse it, you put it in a product, and you give it to a consumer. So in that sense, it's a lot of parallels on how you create a beverage or any CPG product to how you create a cannabis infused product. And that's sort of, my mindset was into going into this was that's all the things that I have learned through my undergrad and through process engineering and everything I learned at Diageo. I should be able to take those principles, those learnings, and transfer it into a new set of disciplines, but still very much similar in philosophy to the old one. And that's, that was my mindset. I actually didn't even realize it until someone told me that. And that was the guy that hired me. His name was Andrew Rashkow. And he owned a beverage development R&D company, and he's owned it for many, many years. It's called Imbibe, very successful beverage R&D company. They do sort of behind the scenes R&D and beverage development for many, many companies. And they a lot of companies on the shelf that you see when you go to the grocery store, they don't have their own development. They don't have their own R&D. They're just brands.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, you don't want on paper that it comes out that Diageo failed at this and that, and they're just trying, but nothing's happening, right? So they use, maybe I'm sure, these companies to test more aggressive and risk-taking things.
Exactly. So Imbibe is not the brand itself. Imbibe just does the R&D.
Got it.
And so, I knew about this company, and I always from afar. I had some friends that worked there, and I was always fascinated by what they did. My beverage background, this was a beverage formulation company. This gentleman contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting an R&D company in the cannabis space." And I was like, "Well, what do you want from me? Like, I'm a whiskey guy." And he's like, "Well, think about it. It's sort of very similar in how you approach it." And, it's got my mind thinking. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd never thought of it.
Were you the cannabis user at that time? Or are you still, or?
Yeah, just recreational, not a very high tolerance
but
sort of.
I've always thought that you have to be like a user sort of even to think of going in cannabis, because it's so different and weird.
It is. Yeah. I mean, look, I recreationally enjoy cannabis for a very long time.
And you had an idea a little bit, right? Before you went into this. Got it. Cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I understood what it was and the effects and why people would like it. And
understood.
Had a social circle of friends that understood. I mean, I got it. I understood why. And I also understood this was the next big thing coming. And I'd wondered myself on the side, like, how do I get into this? Like, but it never occurred to me that any of my skill sets would translate until this gentleman talked to me about it. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And he said, look, I'm starting this company. Why don't you come on board? And, at that point I'd been at Diageo for about 15 years, the Seagrams and Diageo combined, right? 15 years. And, I was like, why not? I'd finished my MBA in 2007. I was like, how do I actually just leverage all the skills I have, right? And let's just take that step. And so I did. It was in
And how
2000.
many years now in Canada you did this?
7 years. I'm like an old man in cannabis.
Wow,
Yeah.
7 years.
And they say cannabis years is like dog years. So I'm more like
Yeah.
49.
Wow, man, that's like 7 years there and like 15 years in alcohol. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I pick my vices, right?
You look
Um,
young. I mean, nice.
Thank you.
So I
Um,
think on that when you started, because you were at like great at the peak of your career and nice, everything was comfortable, and I'm sure there is still more upside in a company like Diageo because it's so huge, right? What were like what were the initial failures? Let me say it that way, where you were like, oh, like you were getting frustrated. What were those kind of things? Because I'm sure a lot of other entrepreneurs out there in cannabis are at a stage which you've already seen. So how what were the suffocating points?
in cannabis, oh wow. I think one of the first things, first of all, when I came to cannabis, like there was no real plan. I had to create the plan, right?
Got it. So it was just you two
And
basically deciding to start this.
it was, yeah, just a blank slate of paper. What are we going to do?
Wow.
How are we going to get there? What are the
Wow.
products we're going to create? So you start from this point where
Nice.
you're like, normally I'm being told what to do in some
Mm,
ways. I have stakeholders and leaders, and there's a structured program around me, and I have to work within that program to this wild world where like there's nothing and it's all you free to create. So that initially that freedom was scary
mm,
because you're like, what, I don't know what to do here. And what I would say is, even the folks that I've hired that came from CPG, what I tell them is, you actually know how to do this.
mm,
Just because you've never done it before doesn't mean you don't know how to do it.
mm,
Just trust yourself, trust your instincts, and
mm.
we will figure it out together. And that's been a great way of teaching, giving people the confidence. And that's true. The folks that I hire have come from CPG, come from alcohol, but instinctually they know all these things. They
So I
just,
think that's a good segue to the product development questions as well. So when you decided your first product line for this business, right? What were the questions you asked to yourself, or you did some market gap analysis? I guess walk us over, how did you come with your first couple of products?
just connecting back to the previous question, I'll connect the two. You asked the frustrations and the failures. I mean, I think our first product was not a success, right? You're going to experience more failures than you are going to experience successes when you come into a world like this, because you're still trying to understand the consumer. You're still trying to understand why people purchase the way they purchase. And when you're trying to create, in retrospect, I would not have created that first product the way we did. That to me is a product for the future. And we created it first. And we thought, hey, if you build it, they will come. And that was not the right approach. So the first product we created was a line of tinctures and topicals for the wellness consumer. And our initial premise going in was, hey, there's a massive population of people out there that have anxiety, and they have sleep issues, and they have chronic pain, and they have all the reasons why we've heard, cannabis is something that can help.
And I believe at that time, wellness was the hot topic, right?
Exactly. And so we said, this is where we want to go, and holistic healing and natural healing, and just move away from pharmaceuticals and pills. This is the wave. This is what we want to catch. We created this awesome brand called The Root of It All, which you'll appreciate. Basically, it's THC, CBD, cannabinoids, but then blended with Ayurvedic herbs and spices that also have similar functional properties. So, for example, we created a tincture called Sleep, for sleep, and we call it Stop, but we call it Sleep. And it was basically, I think, a 1-to-1 mixture of THC and CBD, but then we infused it with chamomile, lavender, and valerian. All in Ayurveda, these are all herbs that help with relaxation and sleep. And we blended it all together. And we went out and started doing market surveys and saying, hey, I've created this product. We built an R&D lab in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
I staffed it with amazing, smart people, product developers, engineers, etc., biochemists. And we said, let's create this product. And then we were going out. At one point, we were running, 3 or 4 consumer panels a week.
That's a lot of investment.
In a month. Yeah. And getting the feedback saying, this product is actually helping people fall asleep faster. And we were running statistics on, Pittsburgh Sleep Index and all this stuff. And you had to learn all this, like this, this is all learning on the fly. Because the big difference was, hey, I can still create a product. And in alcohol, Bev, my main goal was to make it taste good. Now I have to make it taste good, but I also need to make it feel good.
The functionality has to be working, right?
Exactly.
That's what you're saying?
Yes. How do I characterize the high? How do I characterize when the onset comes? How do I characterize what that onset feels like? How do I characterize what the experience feels like? How do I characterize if someone is falling asleep faster or not? How do I characterize what the offset looks like? How do I characterize what that person feels like when he or she wakes up in the morning? So now, in addition to does this taste good, right? As in alcohol or any kind of beverage product, now I have to ask myself, well, how did the person feel? Not only instantaneously, but for the next 8 hours after taking the product. So it's a whole different approach from a consumer point of view on how you approach product development now. And so
on that, like one of the questions which even a lot of people asked it in the conference is it's so hard because everyone's different. I may get high in like half a joint and maybe you will get in 1 joint, right? I may get a kick in 15 minutes, you will get in 30 minutes. I may feel like shit and maybe you will feel relaxed. But how do you what was your observation when you did all this? I mean, you've touched so many customers. So is this true? Like, how do you work around it?
It's very variable. There's a lot of variability in it. So, I mean, the best you can do is you can minimize your variability going into the study. So you can say, okay, I'm only recruiting people that have problems sleeping. So I now have a smaller subset. And you tell them before you come in and take your test, don't eat anything for 6 hours before you take the test. Okay, now minimize what's in their system. But that's, to the extent that you can do that, the key thing is to have lots of data points. So you can take the outliers out and you can put a statistical approach to the data you do have, at least get 30, 40 data points. And then you can run a statistics on it and say, okay, is my data set A different from data set B? Also, there's a massive placebo effect, right? So you'd give someone product with nothing in it. And they'd come back saying, oh yeah, I got high after 20 minutes. So like, okay.
Well,
30% of our data shows this placebo effect. So you have to take that out, and then you're left with actual data. And sometimes you can get good inferences from that data, and sometimes.
So I think what I'm understanding is that in cannabis testing and analysis, data and the batch and who you are testing, that is super important. Like to figure out your testing process is like the most, because that can just completely change the whole thesis of what you've developed.
Yeah, 100%. Now that is if you are trying to achieve a specific outcome, right? If you're just trying to get high and your product is like, okay, you're going to get high. I don't care how you get high. I don't care what. Doesn't matter. Then you're just trying to get people high, and that's okay too. That's a different type of product you're creating. So the first type of product we created was what we were talking about, very specific, and we nailed it. I mean, we got results that we were like, yes, and there's a lot of R&D that went into this. We launched this product and we're like, this is it. This is going to kill it. And product bombs, right? It's like, no one's buying it. Why? Is it the pricing, the positioning, and what is it? It's like, people just want to get high, really. Like, come on, that can't be the case, right? Like, I thought the whole reason I came into this industry was to help. I came into this industry because I felt I'd created alcohol beverage products for so long that don't necessarily have the best health benefits in the long term. And here I could take my skill set and make products that could actually help people. And what we found is those people are just not going into the stores and the dispensaries and buying these products. So what do? You pivot and you pivot and you pivot. And so, at the end of the day, what we realize is just like any business, you have to have a portfolio of products. You have to have a product that is for the here and now, that meets the consumer's needs today, the products that people are going into the stores to buy today, that keeps your lights on. You have to have a product for tomorrow as well. And at the end of the day, to me, that's what product development really is. And that's what the quote I gave you, but it's the Wayne Gretzky quote as well, right? You try to move to where the puck is going to be. You skate to where the puck is going to be. So yeah, you have to have a product development pipeline that.
So how do you analyze where the buck is going, right? What kind of questions are you asking your company? What kind of research are you collecting? So this is where the next 6 months, this is where where the magic is going to happen.
The good news is there are plenty of analogies out there from the world that exists already that you can look at and say, okay, this is the consumer behavior that is going to evolve. And beverage, as an example, which I think you're in such the right spot at the right time, it is one of those areas. How are people going to evolve their consumption? I think so we know people are moving away from smoking. We know people are, even though flower is such a huge part of it, you're seeing a move towards vaping, which is arguably safer than smoking, better than smoking, but still you're taking something into your lung. Into the ingestion route, sublingual, and then basically edibles and beverages. And as you see more and more people coming into this industry, you're starting to see more people move into these edibles and beverage area, or the canna curious coming in and saying, yeah, I don't mind taking a little gummy tonight, or I'll have a drink. Sure, I'll have a 2 milligram can beverage, or our beverage is the YOLO shot, which is 100 milligrams. People are coming into this and saying, yeah, we'll take a shot of that. But where is it going to go? That's the question. And are we ready to start investing behind those technologies? Right now, it's still very much in a food and beverage type space.
Got it.
Right. And to me, that's where over time, I think it's going to take 5-7 years before that will become the predominant form of consumption. Regulations have to open up a little bit to allow consumption. And the goal, I think all of us can see it, is that someday you'll be able to drink a weed product like you drink an alcohol beverage product. And as long as the attributes of that product meet a consumer need, it has to come on, it has to hit you very fast, and no one wants to wait 45 minutes to an hour to feel the effects. It has to taste great. It has to feel really good. And quite honestly, you have to come down pretty quickly, because if you're out drinking or having to mirror that occasion, you don't want to be high for 7 hours, right? So you want to be able to characterize that high, and there's ways to use technology and science to create that profile. And that's honestly, like, I think at the end of the day, what the big alcohol bev companies and beer companies, that's what they're trying to get to, is how do I create a drinking experience that we are also familiar with through years of practice, and sort of parallel it to this new occasion for how we consume with the cannabis product. That to me is sort of where this is going. Absolutely.
And I think that's what big companies are working on, to make it more delicious, to make it more like socially acceptable, and to not get to have that balance where you don't like how in like you can just go in 30 minutes and you're done, the party's over. Rather, you want to continue that for 4 hours if there was a party and so on.
Exactly.
One of the question I wanted to ask was, because I think you wear that business hat as well. When I had my own brands, wine brands and spiritual brand. I also have a gin brand right now, separate business, right? So when I built my products, sometimes there was just a business objective to it. Okay, this product is going to open doors for 7-Elevens of the world. this product is going to open doors for Total Wine and More of the world and Bevmos of the world. This product is for Michelin star restaurant. This is my 100% markup wine. This is my, like a 500% markup whiskey. And this is my 20% volume play so that I can get paid because everyone's going to love that product, right? So you design the whole portfolio with business objectives. Forget about, that it's the same bloody wine at 100% markup and it's the same with 20%, but it's one is retailing at $7.99, one is at $14.99, right? So how much of this people are missing on? I think because I can see a lot of entrepreneurs who doesn't use the product to actually do business, like open the doors and collect. You know what I mean? Like I believe in a triangle where the top is like opening doors, getting that traction, getting the reputation going, that you have one product that has to make sure everyone knows about, and then you have at the bottom that 200% margin. Do you design those kind of things in your mind when you're making?
Absolutely. And I work very closely with our leadership team, who are all very smart businessmen and think exactly in the same way. And so we have 3 brands right now, right? And within those brands we have different products, but just as you said, I think a lot of folks don't have that portfolio diversification and don't have a clear reason for being for every product in their portfolio and what they hope to accomplish with that product. So you can't have a value product and expect it to sell in a high-end dispensary. You can't have a premium product and put it in a dispensary that in a demographic area that's just how much dollars can I get from my THC. It's got to be a very strategic, channel segmented, consumer segmented way of going about your portfolio. So as an example, our Tough Mama brand, which is the one we showcased at the Beverage, we showcased at
I think that won some awards, right? Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Something happened. I think one of the fastest growing, or some statistics I saw, it's like second fastest growing or something.
It's doing really well. So our infused pre-rolls, which basically we're taking a joint and infusing it with more THC. One hit of that's plenty for me, but there are people who will smoke the whole thing. That is in fact that door opener brand product.
So that's a volume play. You want to rotation.
We're going to move a lot of volume. We make very good margins on it, but we're going to move a lot of volume on it. We're going to price it right. And we're going to target the consumer that with the right messaging and the right emotional attachment to the brand, and say this is it. And that pre-roll alone has just opened over 200 doors for us at this point, right? But behind that, then you say, okay, look, there's this other portfolio of products. And a lot of times people are like, oh, you guys are the same company? Like, yeah, we're the same company. We have an entry point door opener that gets your attention because it's priced for what you want. Behind that, we have a beverage that's really, really good. And oh, by the way, this beverage, you don't need to put it in the fridge. It's shelf stable for 12 months at room temperature, not like anything else. And you can just put it on your counter. It's like a 5-hour energy. Oh, and by the way, we also have these vapes that are priced to sell. And then behind that, we have our premium portfolio of products. We have this premium vape pen for your premium consumers that are walking in the door that want sort of a lifestyle, just have a lifestyle need. They're the Starbucks, not the Dunkin' Donuts. They'll drive, they want something better. They'll pay a little more for a better product.
But let's say all these 4 products that you mentioned, right? I believe that your first one is not just like door opener, it is the reputational play as well. Because of that, you are selling and cross-selling other 3 things, right? So
appears to be.
So you got to make sure that is always a success, right? Like you will have to pump up so much into it to make sure that one is a name, correct? Like to make a loss leader or a horse product, like a main one, what is the minimum margin you are able to live with? Like 10%?
So here it's a loaded question because it's different from state to state.
Okay.
Right? Every state has its own value chain dynamics right now. We're in California. We exited Colorado and we exited Washington because we couldn't make the economics work for us. And we focus everything on California. It's another one of those pivots you take as a startup where you think, yeah, I'm going to take my product and roll it out everywhere. And you realize every state is a different ballgame. But, speaking in California alone, the retailers take, they mark it up 2.5, 3x from what the wholesale price is. So they're making good margin, but they also have a hard time with how their taxes work and what excise taxes they pay. And, there's a whole twig E. And it's really hard on the retailers right now as well. So, at the end of the day, in California, as an example, if you're making any money, that's great. You're in a great spot. Margins, if you're at the net margin somewhere in the 10%, that's a good spot to be. Gross margin, you need to be somewhere in the 50% range.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much marketing.
You got to get really efficient in California. You got to really understand, how to source, how to produce, how to optimize your labor, how to minimize quality issues, how to, really optimize your supply chain, work with the right suppliers, optimize your processes, and at the end of the day, create a good product that meets the need. It's hardcore in California. You can get away with less of that in other states because there's a little more room to play around with the dynamics, and other states aren't as brutal as they are in California right now.
Cool. I think, Shehzad, there's a lot we're going in all the directions, but I'm liking it because it's alcohol as well, and I know that industry as well. To sum it up, let's also summarize this in maybe 5-6 lessons you've learned for product development process where people can avoid that mistakes and save some money by listening to you, which you can suggest.
One of the lessons for me is coming from the spirits world, where the whole idea is I'm going to creating a premium brand, premium product. It's sort of the very buzz. Everyone wants to create a premium product, right? When you're coming to the cannabis industry, the industry is still trying to figure out what's value, what's premium, what's super premium. It's none of that's set yet. So when you're coming from a world where those paradigms are set, whether it's toothpaste or whether it's alcohol beverage,
True.
When you come into the cannabis world, just understand that it's a moving target. And so, when you're trying to do something premium, you have to ask yourself, premium to what? And if you can't answer that question, then you probably are playing in the wrong field. That's number one. And then a lot of folks that say, I'm going to create a premium cannabis line. I'm like, good luck. Answer that question first. The second is, people ask me, what's your day-to-day like? And I say, my day, I feel like I'm trying to land a plane on a runway that keeps moving. So I'm approaching my landing and the runway is moved, and I have to go back in the air and circle around and come back. And that might happen 5 or 6 times before I can actually land the plane. The challenge that I've seen, I remember now, the challenge that I've talked to a lot of folks in this industry, at least at the level that I'm at, is by the time you conceive a product and you go through the development process, because it's a good product and you want to make it really well and bring it to market, the consumer has already moved on to something else. And you're sitting there going, how do I do this? How do I change this dynamic? Because it takes me 6 to 8 months to put a product in the market. But by the time at the 6-8 months ago, this was a hot product, but now I brought it to market and it's moved on. And my advice is stop chasing those products. Stop chasing the next hot thing, because you'll always be chasing. Instead, really understand where you think the market is going and position yourself there, even if the market's not there yet. It's a better bet. There's a higher chance of success there than chasing a product. What will happen when you're chasing is you'll get the product out, the consumer has moved on, a lot of people have entered that space now because they're all chasing too. It's a fight to the bottom at that point. There's no differentiation anymore, and all your assumptions on how you thought you could make money on it are gone.
Good
So
point.
not only do you fail because the consumer has moved on, but your financials aren't going to work. It's a better bet to move to where you think they're going to go, even if they're not there yet. And that's what I think product development really comes down to. It's understanding where they're going to go, and you're wrong sometimes, but I'd rather be wrong that way. Third is trust your instincts. You know, everything you've done so far in your career with a structure around you has led you to this point. And now you're in a world where there are no rules and it's you, and you have to navigate it, and it's very scary, but your instincts, you actually know the answers. You've been trained. If you've come from kind of a CPG, beverage, whiskey world, you actually know the answer. You just don't know you know it. But your instincts will guide you, and it'll guide you in the right direction. And that's what I've told many people on my team who've come in. And, you know, I have a good friend of mine now, also a chemical engineer in background. When he first joined the company, I said, "You're in charge of quality." And he's like, "I've never done quality before." And I was like, "Actually, you have. You just don't know you have." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, just try it." And sure enough, he's like, "Yeah, Shez, you're right. Like, I actually have an understanding of how to do this. I know it. I just never did it before." Because in the CPG world, you are exposed to all those elements. You learn enough about it. You just never, you may not do it.
Yeah.
And now you're in a field where what you know is sufficient to move you to that next level.
Amazing.
So yeah, just you gotta go for it, I guess.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Shez, was, when you're scaling products into other states, you can control a lot in your own facility, but now there is a co-packer. So how do you roll out your processes? How do you implement, this product development cycle there? Your journey for that, like your lessons for that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And until we don't have federal legalization and interstate commerce here, that's the issue that any MSO or multi-state operator would be dealing with, either through their own manufacturing or through a co-packer. Number one is the raw materials itself, right? So because you can't have interstate commerce in cannabis, the cannabis used in state A has to be grown in state A.
The entire supply chain has to be within that state, correct?
Wow. The cannabis supply chain. Now, bottles and labels I can get from anywhere, right? But cannabis, where the most important source in your product has to be sourced locally. And honestly, Durban poison strain in state A, they can call it that, and then call it Durban poison in state B. They're not the same. They're probably two completely different things. They just happen to be called the same thing. And so we first of all, we moved away from internally referring to strains as strain names. We moved to profiles.
Okay.
We map the profiles and say, okay, profile A and profile. So we start getting consistency in our raw materials. That's probably the most important thing. Beyond that, in any manufacturing. So for a company like us that has some serious IP and has, patent pending technology around nano emulsion and antioxidation and those types of things, even in extraction, one of the key things you have to do is, especially if you're working with a co-packer, you have to be able to protect your IP. So creating processes that black box your IP so that the co-packers cannot reverse engineer that product.
Oh, wow.
That's another really important thing we have to think about.
So you supply some part of it, which is controlled by you, I believe. Is that how it works?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And then, it's pre-mixed, it's pre-blended.
And then CBD is mixed at the state level.
Correct. CBD or THC. And And even the process is proprietary. So, that's a trickier one because at the end of the day, someone has to do it. We've done it where we've hired our own person to do it within the co-packers operation. And that's a negotiation. Other time they say, okay, there's enough scary documents here between us that, if we feel
contracts, right? A lot.
Contracts, you contract it out the wazoo. But you have to really make sure that that's all tightly, the formula is really important at that point. The biggest thing is execution, really, right? Because co-packers incentive is to run as much product down their line as possible. That's how they make money, right? They make very small margin per unit, but they have to run a lot of units. So their incentive is throughput. Whereas you, a small brand working with them, your incentive is quality. You're like, I want to make sure my product is right every single time. And that's where the conflict happens. It's very tricky, especially over the last few years with COVID, where people couldn't travel. Normally I would want my engineers to be at the co-packer for every run. True. Right? To me, that's the key. It's about having the right people oversee. And the co-packers hate that because they're like, get out of my business. But at the end of the day, having your products better than anybody else. The nuances of your product. How to troubleshoot if something goes wrong. Because you've done it in the lab, you've done it in the pilot plant, you've scaled it up, you've seen all the things that can go wrong. The co-packer, there's only so much you can transfer knowledge from an SOP or from a phone call. So having your people there, at least for a few weeks, months during the first phase of the startup, and then when your next batch comes, you go back there. I think that's the key thing. It's quality control. And when we've done that, we've been successful. In fact, at one point, we just took one of our engineers and just put him on the line at the co-packer and said, you run this line. And, this guy is very well established person in his career. And, he called me and said, Shehzad, I'm like a line operator right now. And I'm like, that's what the job takes right now, man. I don't know what to tell you, but that's one of the key learnings, especially in cannabis. What you find is, beverage is one. Beverage is probably an exception, but if you're making tinctures or topicals, or you're making even just joints, the operators that you have on the line, these are not professionals that came from the tobacco industry or from the cosmetic industry that have made topicals before, understand how to look for flaws or defects. They're not. They're cannabis enthusiasts or in the cannabis business that love being here and want to be part of it in some way. And you have to train them. You have to train them what to look for. So you can't take anything for granted. True. Right? They're very smart people that want to do well, but they have not been trained. And that's part of it. You gotta train them, and you gotta work with them, and you gotta bring their level up.